The Galactic Council chamber had never hosted a demonstration quite like this one. Representatives from 47 different species filled the vast amphitheater. Their attention focused on the central arena where the most advanced holographic combat simulation system in known space hummed with readiness. Marcus stood at the edge of the arena, feeling distinctly out of place among the assembled dignitaries, military leaders, and scientists. 3 months ago, he'd been a simple fitness trainer. Now he was about to present what many were calling the most significant advancement in combat theory in galactic history. The simulation parameters have been set according to your specifications, announced Counselor Prime Zephyhi, her crystalline form reflecting the arena's lights. The scenario represents a scaled version of the Carillion-Nexari border conflict, fortified positions, civilian populations at risk, multiple hostile factions, and a requirement for precise, non-lethal neutralization. Ambassador Crix shifted nervously beside Marcus. Are you certain Theros is ready for this? The scenario is designed to challenge an entire military unit, not a single individual. Marcus watched as Theros entered the arena from the opposite side. The transformation from the broken dragon he'd first encountered was nothing short of miraculous. Theros moved with fluid confidence, his scales gleaming with an inner light that spoke of perfect physical conditioning and absolute mental focus. He's not going alone, Marcus replied quietly. What do you mean? General Vorthek demanded. Instead of answering, Marcus stepped into the arena. Computer, add second participant to the simulation. Human designation, Marcus Chun. The council chamber erupted in confused murmurs. Counselor Prime Zephyhi leaned forward. Human Chun, this simulation is designed for military specialists with decades of combat experience. You are a civilian trainer. With respect, Counselor, what we're about to demonstrate isn't military tactics. It's applied philosophy. And the best way to show you what Tyros has learned is to show you what I've learned from him. Marcus walked to the center of the arena where Tyros waited. The dragon lowered his massive head, allowing Marcus to place his hand on the warm scales. Ready, partner? Marcus asked. Theros's response rumbled through the arena speakers. He says that together you are ready for anything. Dr. Kellyan translated from the observation gallery. The simulation began without fanfare. Suddenly, the arena was transformed into a detailed recreation of the contested border zone, urban structures, defensive positions, and multiple groups of holographic combatants representing the various factions involved in the conflict. Objective parameters loaded, the computer announced. Neutralize all hostile command structures while ensuring 0 civilian casualties. Time limit, 30 minutes. What happened next defined the assembled council's understanding of both combat and cooperation. Theros didn't charge into battle, like the legendary gladiator he had once been. Instead, he and Marcus moved together like parts of a single organism. Marcus provided tactical analysis and positioning while Theros executed with surgical precision that seemed to transcend physics. Impossible, General Vorthek breathed. Watching Theros flow through a defensive perimeter without triggering a single alarm. He's too large for stealth operations. But Theros wasn't using traditional stealth. He was using something Marcus had helped him discover, the ability to move in harmony with his environment rather than against it. Each step was placed precisely to avoid sensor detection. Each movement timed to coincide with background noise and visual distractions. Phase 1 complete, Marcus called out, having directed Theros to a position that provided optimal sight lines to 3 separate command bunkers. Remember what we practiced about sequential targeting? Theros rose to his full height and took a deep breath. Instead of the massive gout of flame that traditional dragon fire represented, he released 3 precisely controlled streams of superheated plasma. Each stream struck with pinpoint accuracy, disabling the command bunker's communication arrays without harming the occupants or causing structural collapse. Extraordinary, whispered Counselor Prime Zephyhi. The thermal control required for that precision is something every dragon possesses, Marcus explained without taking his eyes off the simulation. They just never learned to use it that way because nobody taught them they could. But the real demonstration was yet to come. The simulation's second phase activated multiple hostile units converging on their position from different directions. Traditional military doctrine would have called for retreat or preparation for a siege defense. Instead, Marcus and Theros did something that would be discussed in military academies for generations. They split up. Computer. Track both participants independently, Marcus called out as he sprinted toward the eastern approach while Theros flowed toward the western perimeter. Tactical error, General Vorthak muttered. They're dividing their force against superior numbers. Are they? Ambassador Crix asked, studying the tactical display more carefully. Marcus had no combat training, and no weapons beyond his understanding of movement and physics. But he moved through the hostile environment like water flowing downhill, using the attackers' own momentum against them, redirecting their attention and positioning them exactly where Theros needed them to be. Meanwhile, Theros demonstrated combat capabilities that transcended everything the galactic military had previously documented about dragon warfare. He wasn't fighting his opponents, he was orchestrating them, using minimal force to create maximum confusion while maintaining perfect awareness of Marcus's position and needs. They're not fighting the enemy? Dr. Kellyan observed with growing amazement. They're choreographing them. The pattern became clear as the simulation progressed. Marcus would analyze the tactical situation and position the enemies through misdirection and movement, while Theros would execute precisely calibrated responses that neutralize threats without causing permanent harm. Each moved with absolute trust in the other's capabilities. Phase 2 complete, the computer announced. All hostile units neutralized. Civilian casualties, 0. Structural damage, minimal. But the simulation wasn't over. Phase 3 introduced a true challenge, a hostage situation involving multiple species in a location that prohibited the use of traditional dragonfire or overwhelming force. This is where we see if the theory translates to reality, Marcus said quietly. Studying the tactical display, the scenario was diabolical in its complexity. Hostages were positioned throughout a multi-level structure, with hostage-takers from different factions who wouldn't cooperate with each other. Traditional rescue operations would require multiple specialized teams and would likely result in casualties. Marcus and Theros approached the situation with a strategy that none of the watching military experts had ever considered. They negotiated not through threats or demonstrations of force, but through something far more powerful. They offered to teach the hostage-takers what they had learned. He's explaining the philosophy behind our training methods. Dr. Kellyan translated as Theros spoke to the holographic faction leaders. He's telling them that true strength comes from cooperation, not domination. Marcus positioned himself where all the factions could see him. Computer, display my vital signs and stress indicators for all participants. The holographic enemies could see that Marcus showed no fear, no aggressive intent, and no deception in his biometric readings. More importantly, they could see that Theros, despite his overwhelming physical capabilities, was matching Marcus's emotional state. We don't want to fight you, Marcus announced. We want to show you that there's a better way to get what you need. What followed was unlike anything in recorded military history. Instead of a rescue operation, it became a demonstration of conflict resolution through understanding and adaptation. Marcus and Theros worked together to address the underlying concerns that had led to the hostage situation in the first place. He's treating the simulation like real people with real motivations, General Vorthak said with growing amazement. And it's working. One by one, the holographic faction leaders began to lower their weapons and engage in dialogue rather than conflict. The hostages were released not through force, but through the simple demonstration that cooperation produced better results than aggression. Phase 3 complete, the computer announced. All objectives achieved through nonviolent resolution. Mission success, total. The arena fell silent as the simulation ended and the holographic environment faded away. Marcus and Theros stood in the center of the space, both breathing normally despite having just completed what should have been an impossible mission. Counselor, Prime HFY was the first to speak. In 40 years of military analysis, I have never seen anything remotely resembling what just occurred. How did you know the negotiation approach would work? We didn't, Marcus admitted. But we knew that every conflict has underlying causes, and every sentient being responds to genuine respect and understanding. The simulation's AI was sophisticated enough to model real psychological responses. Ambassador Crick stepped forward. But the tactical coordination, the precision of movement, the thermal control, these represent capabilities far beyond anything previously documented. Thyros responded, and Dr. Kellyan provided translation. He says that the transformation of Medical Bay 7 into something resembling a gladiatorial training ground had taken Marcus most of the night. When the morning shift arrived, they found combat posts arranged in precise patterns, weighted training implements sized for a dragon, and holographic targets that pulsed with challenging light sequences. Thyros studied the setup with obvious interest, his golden eyes tracking each piece of equipment with the focus of a predator. For the first time since arriving at the station, he looked truly awake. "Today we stop rehabilitation and start preparation," Marcus announced to the gathered crowd of observers. Word had spread throughout the station's alien community that something significant was happening, and representatives from a dozen species had come to watch. Commander Zoc stepped forward. "Human Chin, I must ask, preparation for what?" "Thyros is retired. There are no gladiatorial competitions for him to return to." Marcus adjusted the gravity settings to 1.5 times standard. "Commander, with respect, you're thinking too small. We're not preparing him to go back to what he was. We're preparing him to become what he's meant to be." Dr. Kellyan activated her translator as Thyros rumbled a question. "He wants to know if you truly believe he can regain his former strength." "I believe he can exceed it," Marcus replied without hesitation. "But only if he's willing to trust a training method that's going to seem completely alien to everything he knows." The response from Thyros was immediate and lengthy. Dr. Kellyan listened, her 4 eyes widening as the translation came through. He says he has lived for 800 years, dominated every challenger for 3 centuries, and mastered every combat style known to the galaxy. He wants to know what a small human could possibly teach him that he hasn't already learned." Marcus smiled and picked up what looked like a simple wooden staff. "Tell him I'm going to teach him the difference between fighting and flowing." What followed challenged every assumption the watching aliens held about both human training methods and draconic capabilities. Marcus didn't push Thyros through traditional strength exercises or combat drills. Instead, he guided the dragon through movements that seemed to blend martial arts, dance, and meditation into something entirely new. "Watch his positioning," Marcus called out to the observers as he demonstrated a complex sequence of weight shifts and rotational movements. Traditional gladiatorial combat is about power and dominance, but real mastery is about efficiency and adaptability. Thyros initially struggled with the concepts. His centuries of training had focused on overwhelming force and intimidation. The idea of redirecting energy rather than meeting it head-on was foreign to his warrior mindset. "He's resisting the flow," Dr. Kellyan noted, watching Thyros attempt a defensive sequence that should have been fluid but came out jerky and forced. "That's normal," Marcus replied, gently correcting Thyros' stance. "He spent centuries training to be an immovable object. Now I'm asking him to become an irresistible force that can move in any direction at any moment." The breakthrough came during the 3rd hour of training. Marcus had been working with Thyros on a defensive sequence that involved redirecting an opponent's attack while simultaneously positioning for a counterstrike. After dozens of failed attempts, something clicked. Thyros moved through the sequence with sudden, fluid grace, his massive frame flowing like water around an imaginary opponent's strike. The movement was so smooth, so perfectly executed, that the watching aliens gasped in unison. "There it is," Marcus said quietly. "That's what 3 centuries of combat experience looks like when it's channeled properly." But Thyros wasn't done. As if a dam had burst, he began chaining the defensive movement into increasingly complex sequences, his body remembering patterns of movement that transcended anything he'd learned in the gladiatorial arenas. His scales began to shimmer with an inner light that none of the medical staff had seen before. "Incredible," whispered Dr. Kellyan. "His bio readings are off the charts, but not in a stress pattern. It's like his entire physiology is synchronizing." Marcus nodded, not taking his eyes off Thyros. "That's called the zone in human athletics. It's when mind and body achieve perfect harmony. Most athletes only experience it for moments. The great ones learn to live there." Ambassador Crix, the Draconis Rex diplomatic representative who had arrived that morning, stepped forward with barely concealed awe. "In 800 years of recorded draconic history, I have never seen movements like those. How is this possible?" "Your people train Theros to fight like a dragon," Marcus explained. "I'm training him to fight like Theros. There's a difference between learning techniques and discovering your true nature." The sessions that followed drew increasingly larger crowds. Word had spread beyond Kepler Station to the broader galactic community. Athletes, trainers, and military specialists from across known space began requesting permission to observe the unprecedented rehabilitation. General Vorthak, the legendary Corellian military strategist, arrived during the second week of advanced training. He stood silently for hours, watching Theros flow through combat sequences that seemed to defy the laws of physics. "This changes things," General Vorthak finally said to Marcus. "If these techniques can be taught to others, They can't," Marcus interrupted. "What we're doing here isn't a training system that can be copied. It's a process of discovering individual potential. Every being would need a completely different approach. But the principles could be adapted?" Marcus considered carefully. "The principles are universal. The application is completely individual. You'd need trainers who understand both the science of physical development and the art of seeing what each person could become." Meanwhile, Theros was discovering capabilities he'd never known he possessed. The traditional gladiatorial training of his youth had focused on his species' natural advantages: size, strength, and dragon fire. Marcus's approach was revealing abilities that had been dormant for centuries. "He's developing precognitive reflexes," Dr. Kellyan reported to the assembled observers during a particularly impressive session. "His nervous system is processing threat assessment faster than our instruments can measure." Theros was sparring against holographic opponents now, multiple attackers coming from different angles simultaneously. But he wasn't just defending, he was orchestrating the entire engagement, positioning himself to make his opponents interfere with each other while creating openings for devastating counterattacks. "This isn't possible," Ambassador Crix said, his translator struggling to keep up with his rapid speech. "Dragons don't move like this. We're powerful, yes, but we're not supposed to be graceful." "Who told you that?" Marcus asked. "Your people have been limiting themselves based on assumptions about what dragons should be instead of exploring what dragons could be." The real revelation came when Thyros began incorporating his dragon fire into the movement sequences. Traditional draconic combat used flame as a finishing move or area denial weapon, but Theros was learning to use precisely controlled bursts of fire as propulsion, steering, and distraction elements within his flowing combat style. "By the stars," General Vorthak breathed, watching Theros use a perfectly timed fire burst to change direction mid-leap while simultaneously blinding an opponent and positioning for a strike. "He's not breathing fire. He's painting with it." Marcus nodded approvingly. Now he's starting to understand the difference between using your abilities and mastering them. But the most significant change wasn't in Thyros's physical capabilities. It was in his presence. The depression and resignation that had characterized his personality for 50 years had been replaced by something that made every observer step back instinctively. "He's not the same dragon," Dr. Kellyan observed during a break in training. "Physically, yes, he's stronger than when we started, but there's something else. Something that wasn't there even in his competition recordings." Marcus wiped sweat from his forehead, studying his massive student. "He's found his purpose again. But more than that, he's found a purpose he never knew he had." Ambassador Crix approached Theros directly, speaking in rapid Draconic. The dragon's response was lengthy and seemed to surprise the ambassador. What did he say? Marcus asked. He said that for 3 centuries he fought to prove he was the strongest dragon. Now he wants to fight to prove that dragons can be more than anyone imagined. And what did you say to that? Ambassador Crix looked troubled. I told him that the draconic councils would never approve of combat techniques that deviate so far from traditional methods. He asked me why the council's approval mattered if he could save lives with what he's learning. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Save lives? What did he mean by that? The Carillion-Nexari border conflict, Ambassador Crix explained reluctantly. It's been escalating for months. Traditional diplomatic solutions aren't working, and military intervention would mean millions of casualties. But if a small team of properly trained specialists could neutralize the command structures without a full-scale war— You want him to go back into combat? Marcus said. And it wasn't a question. Not just him, General Vorthak interjected, joining the conversation. The techniques you've developed here, applied to elite military units from each species, it could change the nature of warfare itself. Marcus Chen had seen a lot of strange things during his 5 years working on Kepler Station, but nothing quite prepared him for the sight of a 30-foot dragon slumped in the corner of Medical Bay 7 like a deflated balloon. The creature's once magnificent scales had dulled to a sickly gray-green, and its massive frame wheezed with each labored breath. That's Thyros, Dr. Kellyan said, her forearms gesturing helplessly at the dragon. The Nexari physician's usual confidence seemed completely shattered. He was the greatest gladiator champion in galactic history, undefeated for 3 centuries. Marcus whistled low, studying the dragon's form with a trainer's eye. Even in his current state, the alien's bone structure spoke of incredible power. The muscle attachment points, though hidden under layers of accumulated fat and atrophied tissue, showed the framework of a being built for explosive movement and devastating strength. What happened to him? Marcus asked, pulling out his tablet to take notes. Retirement, Dr. Kellyan said bitterly. The Galactic Athletic Commission declared him too dominant. Said it was unfair to other competitors. They forced him into retirement 50 years ago. 50 years? Marcus looked at the dragon again. And he's been like this the whole time? Worse, actually. When we found him 6 months ago, he couldn't even lift his head. The Carillion authorities were about to declare him dead weight for disposal. Dr. Kellyan's voice cracked slightly. Marcus, in all my years of xenobiology, I've never seen anything like this. His species, the Draconis rex, they're supposed to be apex predators. Thyros was the apex of the apex. And now— Marcus approached the dragon slowly. Thyros opened one massive golden eye, regarding the human with what seemed like curious indifference. Up close, Marcus could see the intelligence there, buried under layers of depression and physical decay. Hey there, big guy, Marcus said softly. Mind if I take a look? The dragon's response was barely audible, a low rumble that Dr. Kellyan translated. He says you're very small even for a human. He wonders why they sent someone so tiny to examine him. Marcus chuckled. Tell him size isn't everything. Some of the strongest people I know back on Earth could fit in his nostril. Dr. Kellyan translated, and something flickered in Thyros's eye. Amusement, perhaps. Marcus spent the next hour conducting his assessment, running his hands along the dragon's limbs, checking joint mobility, testing reflexes. What he found was both encouraging and horrifying. The muscle memory was still there, buried deep, but 50 years of inactivity had taken a devastating toll. The Galactic Medical Council is stumped, Dr. Kellyan explained as Marcus worked. We've tried every recovery protocol known to science. Nexari regenerative therapy, Carillion bioenhancement, even experimental Zephyrian neural stimulation. Nothing works. His physiology is too unique, too complex. That's your problem right there, Marcus said, standing and wiping his hands on a towel. You're treating him like a medical case instead of an athlete. Dr. Kellyan's 4 eyes blinked in confusion. I don't understand. Look, I've worked with retired athletes before. The human ones, sure, but the principle is the same. When you take someone who's been operating at peak performance for centuries and suddenly stop everything, the body doesn't just get weaker, it forgets how to be strong. Marcus gestured toward Theros. His muscles haven't just atrophied. They've lost the neural pathways that made him great. The coordination, the power transfer, the explosive movement patterns, it's all still in there, but the connections are dormant. So you think you can help him? Dr. Kellyan asked skeptically. I think I can try, but I'm going to need some things. Anything. The Draconis Rex Council has authorized unlimited resources for his recovery. Marcus pulled up his tablet and began typing. First, I need the gravitational settings in this bay adjustable from 0 to about 3 times Earth normal. Second, I need access to a fabrication unit that can create specialized equipment. Third, I need Thyros's complete competition history and biomechanical analyses. Done, done, and done. But Marcus, you should know, the Council hired you as a last resort. They've already started planning his memorial service. If this doesn't work, then we'll know we tried everything. Marcus looked back at Theros, who was still watching him with that calculating golden gaze. Tell him I'll be back tomorrow morning, and we're going to start with the basics. Dr. Kellyan translated, and Theros rumbled something in response. He wants to know what basics mean to someone so small. Marcus grinned. Tell him he's about to find out what human stubborn looks like. The next morning, Marcus arrived early, carrying a large bag of equipment and a determined expression. Word had spread through the station about the human who thought he could rehabilitate the legendary Theros. And Medical Bay 7 had attracted quite an audience. Commander Zoc, the station's Carillion administrator, stood with arms crossed. Human Shun, I hope you understand the significance of what you're attempting. Theros is not just any dragon. He is a living legend among his people. I understand completely, sir, Marcus replied, setting up his equipment. That's why we're going to treat him like one. Theros was awake and alert, having positioned himself to better observe the proceedings. Marcus had asked Dr. Kellyan to provide real-time translation, and the dragon's commentary was already proving entertaining. He says your devices look like toys a hatchling might play with. Dr. Kellyan relayed with barely concealed amusement. Marcus held up a simple resistance band. Tell him this toy has helped human athletes break records and recover from injuries. Sometimes the simplest tools are the most effective. What followed was unlike anything the assembled aliens had ever witnessed. Marcus didn't try to push Theros through complex movements or intense exercises. Instead, he started with breathing. The foundation of all physical performance is oxygen delivery, Marcus explained to his growing audience while demonstrating slow, controlled breathing techniques. If his cardiovascular system isn't functioning optimally, nothing else will work. For 30 minutes, Marcus guided Theros through breathing exercises that seemed almost meditative. The dragon's wheeze gradually decreased, and his scales began to show the faintest hint of their original luster. Remarkable, whispered Dr. Kellyan. His oxygen saturation is improving already. Next came gentle mobility work. Marcus used his body weight and leverage to help Theros move joints that hadn't functioned properly in decades. It was slow, methodical work, nothing that looked impressive to the casual observer. He's not actually doing anything, Commander Zoc muttered to Dr. Kellyan, but Theros was paying attention. The great dragon's eyes never left Marcus as the human worked, and gradually, almost imperceptibly, the dragon began to participate rather than just submit to the movements. Tell him he's doing great, Marcus said, noticing the subtle shift. Ask him to try lifting his right forelimb just a few inches. Theros strained, his massive frame trembling with effort, and managed to lift his arm perhaps 6 inches off the ground before it dropped back down. The watching aliens murmured in amazement, but Marcus just nodded approvingly. Excellent! That's our baseline. Tomorrow we'll try for 7 inches. 7 inches? Commander Zoc looked incredulous. At this rate, it will take years to see any meaningful progress. Marcus packed up his equipment with practiced efficiency. Commander, Theros didn't become the greatest gladiator in galactic history by rushing. He became great through consistent, progressive improvement over centuries. We're going to rebuild him the same way he was built the first time, one small step at a time. As Marcus prepared to leave, Thyros rumbled something that made Dr. Kellyan's translator pause. What did he say? Marcus asked. He said that was the first time in 50 years that anyone has asked him to try instead of telling him he can't. Marcus smiled, shouldering his bag. Tell him that tomorrow we're going to try a little bit harder. Over the following weeks, Medical Bay 7 became the most popular destination on Kepler Station. Aliens from a dozen different species would gather to watch the daily sessions between the small human trainer and the legendary dragon. The progress was indeed gradual, but it was undeniable. Theros's breathing improved first, then his mobility, then gradually, almost imperceptibly, his strength began to return. More importantly, the light in his golden eyes grew brighter each day. Marcus adapted his techniques constantly, learning Theros's unique physiology through trial and observation. He discovered that the dragon's nervous system functioned differently from any Earth creature, requiring specific frequency stimulations to activate dormant motor patterns. He found that Thyros responded better to isometric holds than dynamic movements initially, and that the dragon's pride was as important to his recovery as any physical therapy. You're not just training his body, Dr. Kellyan observed during the third week. You're training his spirit. They're the same thing, Marcus replied, watching Thyros successfully complete a series of controlled movements that would have been impossible when they started. You can't separate physical capability from mental confidence, especially not with someone who spent centuries being the best at what they do. But it was the subtle changes that impressed the medical staff most. Thyros began eating more regularly, his scales regained their metallic sheen, and he started engaging socially with the staff.